The term fairy tale may be overused in football, but in the case of Western Sydney Wanderers it's a fitting description. A club that didn't even exist 2.5 years ago, they now find themselves heading to Morocco for the Club World Cup after beating Al Hilal of Saudi Arabia in the AFC Champions League final. The first Australian side to lift the Continental Trophy, this was no lucky run either, as they had to overcome the J-League champions, Sanfrecce Hiroshima, the defending Asian champions, Guangzhou Evergrande, and last season's Champions League runners-up, Seoul, on their way to the final. The two-legged quarter-final victory over China's Guangzhou Evergrande was probably the highlight, winning on away goals against a side led by Italy's 2006 World Cup winning coach Marcello Lippi, and one that cost twice as much as the entire A-League salary cap. Although the Western Sydney region has long been a hotbed of football in Australia, producing many international players, it had no representation in the A-League until 2012. In October 2012, the newly named Western Sydney Wanderers made their debut in the A-League under the leadership of Tony Popovic, a Westie who had been lured back home from his job as assistant manager to Friedman at Crystal Palace in England. Despite having just 6 months to put together an entire playing squad and make it competitive, Popovic won the premiership at the first attempt. Popovic's masterstroke was to bring in Japan international Shinji Ono in preference to German superstar Michael Ballack. Ono fitted into the coach's system like a glove and earned the undying love of the Wanderers' ever-growing fan base, which began that inaugural season with a modest home crowd of 10,458 and ended it with around 30,000 cheering them on in the grand final, where they lost 2-0 to Central Coast Mariners. As demand grew to watch games at their home ground in Parramatta, Wanderers had to put a limit on season tickets sales, and last term an estimated 10,000 fans made the interstate trip for another grand final, which they lost 2-1 in extra time to Brisbane Roar. The derby with Sydney FC is now arguably the biggest local rivalry in any Australian football code, with sell-out crowds for every clash. Before the start of the campaign, the club that no one wanted to invest in 2 years ago was sold to a consortium led by Paul Lederer, for around $11m, making a tidy profit for the FFA, whose gamble had certainly paid off. But if domestic success was one thing, being competitive on the Asian stage was quite another. Australian clubs have historically found the going tough in the Asian Champions League, and with good reason. The A-League season isn't in sync with the Asian calendar, so qualifiers for the competition have to wait nearly a full 12 months before playing in the tournament, during which time squads can change drastically. That, in turn, is related to the draconian salary cap that all A-League clubs must operate under. Outside of marquee players, who are exempt, the club's 23-man squads are put together for a fraction over $2.5m. Talented players are therefore easily lured elsewhere, particularly overseas, by the promise of bigger wages. But under the astute leadership of Popovic, Wanderers learned quickly and they adapted their style of play to absorb pressure. In all, they kept 10 clean sheets in 14 Champions League games, thanks to some fine goalkeeping from the 39-year-old Ante Kovic. The team also developed a remarkable habit of scoring first and scoring early in the group stage, which gave their doughty defence something to protect. Thousands of people turned up at Sydney Airport to greet the team on their return home. With an ever-growing band of supporters led by the Red and Black Bloc, whose fanaticism has taken fandom in Australia onto a new level, there's now talk of stadium expansion or even reconstruction. Before that, however, there's the Club World Cup, where Wanderers will face Cruz Azul of Mexico. Another win and they will go head-to-head with the might of Real Madrid. Not bad for a club that was still just a concept when Cristiano Ronaldo was putting pen to paper for the European champions.